Hello, everyone, and good morning, and happy Saturday to you all, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and today we are joined by another first-time author making their official debut here on the channel. My guest today grew up in Yucaipa, California, where he learned the subtle charm of small towns and nerd culture. He's been a saxophone player, a driving instructor, a sci-fi connoisseur, a mechanical engineer, and also a lover of cocktail shrimp. After serving a Christian mission to the country of Panama, he picked up Spanish and developed a penchant for storytelling. Since then, he started a writing platform and authored multiple books in genres of urban fantasy and science fiction. My guest enjoys playing tennis, watching anime, and keeping up with the latest video games. If he isn't spending time with his wife and 3 kids, he's probably out back pitching ideas to his adopted Calico cat. And in today's interview, we'll be discussing his upcoming book, Memoirs of a Household Demon. And to tell us all about that and more, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, author Ben Logsdon. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Thanks for having me, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So before we dive into your book, Ben, is there anything else you'd like to share about your background, anything in particular, or will we find that out later?
You'll probably find it out later. I've got a lot of my past is kind of intermixed with the history of the books that I've written, and a lot of the inspiration that I pulled from, comes from a lot of that. So I feel like we'll have a good chance to get acquainted.
All right. Well, as a little teaser for our readers and viewers, can you give us a little taste of your book, Memoirs of a Household Demon?
Yeah, so Memoirs of a Household Demon is a paranormal urban fantasy novel that's set in modern-day Southern California. Ooh. And in the story, every human on Earth is assigned an angel and a demon to help influence their decisions. When one of them, Uriel, starts falling in love with a mortal family, he soon finds himself in a struggle to overcome his core nature and defy the forces of hell itself. So, in essence, I've taken the epic scale, the epic battle of good versus evil, and tried to give it a relatable, humorous spin for our day and age.
Nice. I love it's also another angels book. I love that, the mythology of like angels and demons are getting fleshed out into new genres, new storytelling, and I absolutely love that. So now let's actually dive a little bit more into your childhood, Ben. So what can you tell us about life for you growing up? I know you talked about in your bio that you grew up in very small town, nerd culture, and you've done an array of things growing up. So would you say you've always been a creative person, or did that come about later in life?
I would say I've always had a creative nature. Growing up, especially in elementary school, I dabbled a little bit in creative writing. My teachers might have thought I was a little ahead of my time because I was writing more mature themed, I've always been really big into sci-fi. Sci-fi has been, that's actually kind of what got me into writing, and I'll go into more detail on that in a second. But, I've always been a big sci-fi fan, just fascinated by the concept of technology and aliens, is there life out there? And so I'd write, these speculative stories, and the teachers would just be like, I don't know where this kid's coming up with this stuff, but I like it. Yeah, and so I think I always kind of had a little bit of a passion for it, but it wasn't until a lot later, much later into my adulthood before, I actually got the desire to actually put pen to paper and make a full-length novel. It wasn't something that I originally thought that I'd be able to do, because, it seems daunting, right, to be a writer and try to hammer out hundreds of thousands of words in a coherent fashion in a way that would grip other people.
Yes.
but yeah, so it was sci-fi that started the passion.
Nice, very nice. So, would you say, also going back again to your bio, you, as you got older into your adult years, you went on a Christian mission to Panama where you discovered a penchant for storytelling. So, would you say that was your aha moment to take the stories that you've had with you and develop them into novels, or was that after, maybe like a few months after coming home from the mission?
Oh, I see. Okay, so interesting. So the seeds of Memoirs of a Household Demon kind of did start in Panama. When I was over there, um, there's so much fascinating ghost lore or spirituality when you look, especially at Latin America, and there's so many folk tales. There's a lot of superstition, and then obviously having served the mission, I've always been fascinated by spirituality and wondering like what happens to us when we die. What's our relationship with the dead? And so that kind of spurred a lot of the ideas that would later become part of Memoirs. But what's interesting is the aha moment, the part that tipped me over the edge into becoming a writer, was going back to that sci-fi route, where over the years I'm a big movie buff. I am huge into movies, anime, TV, all kinds of media. I'm really big into that. I've always been a big fan of Star Wars and Star Trek and that kind of stuff. But I noticed that over the years, I felt like mainstream science fiction had kind of stagnated, as far as like mainstream. I know there's lots of great sci-fi books out there. There's lots of ideas that have not been put to film. But I just felt as a whole that sci-fi had kind of stagnated in the mainstream. And so I wanted to bring something fresh to that. And it actually was, I remember I was having dinner with my extended family. We were having some sort of get together, and we were at an Applebee's. And it was, yeah, and we had just seen the movie Passengers with Chris Pratt and
okay.
And so I kind of was like extrapolating off that idea of, what happens if someone travels, hundreds of years in space and then they get to the planet that they want to go to, but what if the planet they're going to isn't what they thought it was, right? What if it had aliens on it, or it was gone, or there's all these what ifs that could happen. I spitballed the idea for a book that would actually be my very first book. It's actually a sci-fi novel called Prodigal Seed.
All right.
And my family loved it. And the people sitting around us in the Applebee's had been listening. And these random people were like, dude, this needs to be a movie. Like these people were just getting in on it. And it was kind of exhilarating to be like, wow, like someone actually likes this idea, and they were like, yeah, you should totally write it. And I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. I'll just give it a shot. So I sat down, started hammering out, and I ended up making, my first book. And I was just like, wow, I actually wrote something. And I'm not going to lie, it was a steaming dumpster fire on the first draft. Because let's be honest, I didn't know how to write really, right? So it took several iterations, and each draft kept getting better and better. I went to writing workshops. I went to all kinds of different things to try to improve my craft. And before attempting to try to publish it, which I'm still in the process of that right now, but before attempting to publish it, I had some friends suggest, well, what if you wrote like a burner novel, like a novel to just dip your toes into the publishing world just to see if you can get a fan base so that, you can then push your main books. So Memoirs, interestingly, was, meant to originally be kind of like a sacrificial lamb. Like it was basically supposed to be like,
okay,
I'm going to write it just to, put it out there and see what people thought. But the funny thing is by the time I got to writing Memoirs, my skills had improved to the point where it ended up being almost like a stronger story than my sci-fi.
All right.
And the reception of the people I read it to, I went to writers' conferences and I pitched it. And people were just like, a demon as the main character? Like the whole concept of like an angel and demon on your shoulder, but like in a much more relatable, almost theologically possible sense. Does that make sense? Like it's speculative fiction, but it's written in a way that it almost makes you wonder, like, could this be real? And it was just such a positive reception that I decided to run with it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to just throw it out there on Wattpad or something. And I'm not just going to burn it. I'm actually going to go full publishing with it. And so here we are. So yeah, that super long story short, basically my inspiration started as I want to be a sci-fi author. And then my attempts to branch out actually unlocked kind of a creative muse that I didn't even know I had. And so it just kind of sprouted from there.
Wow, that is awesome. And it almost kind of now reminds me of like the show, almost like Good Omens, where you have the angel and the demon. They're just, constantly been by each other's side since like the dawn of creation. They're always bickering at each other like an old married couple, which I absolutely love the chemistry between the two actors. But it kind of gives almost that, at least that sense of vibes, like, the angels and the demons like on our shoulders, but are now physically engaging with the rest of society. And it's now like, well, okay, this is going to be interesting. Literally, it's the moral compass of the family and individual, but in physical form, which I think is a very interesting and unique concept, which I am so excited to dive more into throughout this interview. So let's actually start with the creation of Memoirs of a Household Demon. So let's start off at the very beginning. So when you decided that, okay, I'm going to write this story, I want it to be good, what were the goals you had, not just for yourself as the author, but the goals and promises to your future readers? I know you said before that you wanted to be a sci-fi writer at the time, but your friends said make a story first, like a burner to get the fan base started. But as you said, it became something completely on its own, and it's better than you expected.
Yeah, so the thing is, with my sci-fi, the primary goal is entertainment, right?
Right.
I love spectacle. I love action. I love tension. Page turners. That's the primary goal of sci-fi. But with memoirs, the one thing that I really love about it is that it hits a much more spiritual chord, and I mean that in a way that it's meant to edify, right? The goal of memoirs is to inspire hope.
Right.
Oftentimes we see weakness in ourselves and feel like there's no way out, right? Like we can never improve. We can never be the best version of ourselves. And the entire arc of memoirs is an epic redemption story, right? It's to show the reader. Sorry, what?
No, I said, ooh, all right.
Exactly. So it's meant to show the reader that no matter how far we fall or how hopeless we think we are, that all of us have immeasurable value and can rise to our full potential.
Awesome. That actually kind of now reminds me of my own book, which is also a story with angels, where the main character in that book is Michael, the Archangel of War, who's now stripped of his wings and becomes a Nephilim wandering the earth. He's not mortal in the sense that he's human. He still has powers, but he can die just like a human. And he goes on this quest of redemption to, reclaim his name and all of that. And I love those stories of, redemption and hope. And it actually touches on something that we will talk later in the interview when it comes to, marketing and building the fan base of a book, as well as, the name of the author. So let's actually continue with the creation of Memoirs of a Household Demon. So after you started writing the first draft and fine-tuning it, what were the initial reactions like from friends and family, as well as beta readers and ARG readers? Were they the same pre and post publishing, or were there some distinct differences?
I feel it was fairly consistent. The big sell point that people really loved is the main character Uriel's personality. As a demon, he's very playful, mischievous. He's been compared to Loki and Megamind, which I love.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, because he's very much like that. He's playful, but at the same time, he's dark, right? He starts out the book as your typical demon. So he relishes in, things like gluttony and hedonism, and he's just very selfish, very self-centered. If you love the bickering and good omens between the angel and demon, him and his angelic counterpart just butt heads in epic fashion through the vast majority of the book. And that's another highlight. People love the relationship between Uriel and his counterpart Goldie, the angel. Goldie, because the book's from Uriel's perspective, and he doesn't even care enough to know what his angel's name is. So he
Of course.
yeah, so he just nicknames him Goldie. But yeah, it's Uriel's personality that grips people up front, where it's just right as the book starts, it's just him going full bore into, this is my life as a demon, totally nonchalant, just chilling in the fifth circle of hell. I'm going to go to work today. I'm going to go see my human and make sure he's doing something sketchy, and that's always been kind of the main sell point, and people have really loved that. And then as you get further into the book, the drama and the heartstrings get more pulled. That's when you kind of get into the emotional, metaphysical meat of the story and the message it's trying to convey. But yeah, I feel like it was fairly consistent between the first draft to later drafts. It just got better. Each draft just kind of improved the depth of the characters. It got the interactions that people wanted to see. The action got sharper. So yeah, it basically just improved from there.
Excellent. And would you say that those reviews validated your goals as the author? Because at the end of the day, you want to tell a very compelling, captivating story that's going to engage these readers. And from what you told me, the reviews have been consistent throughout the journey of the book, from the initial draft to the final stages. And I imagine for you as the author, it kind of, brought a sense of pride. It's like, I now know people are going to enjoy the story. Like, this is something that's completely new, but it has some familiar elements that people are really going to appreciate.
Exactly. As a fellow author, I'm sure you're familiar with how we teeter between enormous pride in our work and then like hardcore imposter syndrome, where we feel like we're just terrible. And yes, I can't tell you enough how the love and support of my readers and their positivity is literally what kept me going. I wanted to quit so many times, and it's so intimidating, right, to get into the publishing sphere, especially when you're starting from scratch. But like I said, when I went to the writers' conferences and I read the first chapter to a room full of authors, right? So an entire room full of authors, and I'm just like, everyone must think this is trash. And then I finished the first chapter, everyone was like, keep going, like, where's the rest? And it was just so positive that I realized that I was onto something, right? That it was definitely worth pursuing.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we also touched on imposter syndrome, because it is a very true thing, not just for authors, but for everybody in every creative outlet in the world. And why I feel it's important to talk about imposter syndrome is that now more than ever with social media, it allows creators to branch out and meet their audience, grow their fan base, but it's also a double-edged sword. You allow your vulnerability to be targeted by the trolls on the internet, any other entity, and it's hard. It's really hard to show that vulnerability in the digital age, because it could be torn apart, asunder with ease. So, trying to change this question a little bit. Initially, Ben, when you were creating the story, and also when you published it for the first time, yes, you've gotten feedback from friends and family, but now sharing it with complete strangers on social media in a digital world, did you have a voice in the back of your head telling you that this is not going to work? And were you hesitant or reconsidering being an author at that moment because of, publishing your work digitally out there on the internet? It's for everybody, but that level of anxiety, I imagine, was just through the roof.
Yeah. So as of right now, I've got, my book with ARC readers, right? So the book itself releases February 18th, And so I'm in that arc phase where I'm kind of
Okay.
I'm biting my nails, just trying to see what the reviews are gonna come out as, right? But to your point, when I was in the beta reading phase, I had some good beta readers that are fellow authors as well, and part of me was especially like wary to put my work in front of other authors, right? Because you see so many other great authors out there, and it's just like, what are they gonna think of this? Um, Interestingly, I only had a couple people reach out with kind of concern as to the premise of memoirs, because their complaint was that the angels are not depicted as theologically accurate in the sense that I
Mm.
humanize them, right? I give the angels pretty human personalities. They make
Right.
mistakes, they can get frustrated, they can get scared. Um, but the thing that I stuck to my guns on about that was because by humanizing the angels, it gives them room to grow. It makes them more relatable, and and the thing is it made the story so much stronger for it that
Right.
I stuck to my guns. All my other beta readers had very, very positive feedback, and so I have to say, going into the arc phase, even though I'm still kind of nervous to see what people think, one thing I have to say that I'm so pleased with is my editor, my primary editor, um, wasn't even like hardcore Christian at all, right? Not even super Christian, just
Right.
kind of neutral ground, right? And she pointed out the fact that the way the book is presented, using both Christian theology and just generalized ghost lore, that it's something that people can enjoy whether they're Christian or not, right? Even atheists have come to me and told me that they love the premise of the book because
Right.
it basically personifies human behavior in a
Mm.
way that we can all relate to. And so while I was nervous up front, I have to say, going into the arc phase in general, I feel pretty confident. And I feel that if someone gives the book the full chance, if they read it cover to cover, I refuse to believe that they cannot get something positive out of it. I really think that they'll be able to see the merit, regardless of a person's belief, just because the redemption arc is so relatable on just a general scale. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And you actually touched on something that I even struggled with Michael when I went into this book. It was a more high fantasy type of storytelling with all the characters, but there were a lot of, theological traditions with the characterizations of my angels as well. Like you have Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel. They're like the four archangels, but they all have their unique personalities. Uriel is like the calm one. She's the kind of like the brains of the group. She's the swordsman or swordswoman. You have Gabriel, who's a messenger, and since he's the messenger, it felt more appropriate that he be the archer of the team. And Raphael, who is the larger angel. Funny enough, he is the angel, of course, for Raphael. It's like for healing and for well-being. He's probably the most up close fighter. He has like giant gauntlets, fisticuffs as his weapons. And then, of course, you have Michael, who is the warrior angel, who has a halberd, and they have their own personalities. And I was also, to your point, nervous of how people are going to react to the angels acting, that they have the personality, that they have like these distinct features that make them very unique. But yeah, to your point, it's like people can understand that it's not very, as one of my readers said, preachy in the sense like it's trying to be very theological, but this still
Yeah.
has some, roots of, Catholic Christian theology in it, where it tells a story of like, redemption, faith, hope. People are going to enjoy that because other stories have those same traits as well. Like one book was The Coward that I read, which talked about a character sort of finding redemption and understanding who he is. So you can do that. And ultimately, I hope people in your arc phase also get the same feeling, understanding that, yes, while it does have Christian theology and Catholic teachings, it's not going to like preach a message. But if the message that's preached is about, faith, hope, redemption, and if that's what they take away from it, like, good for them. And that kind of leads now into the next phase of the interview, which is what I like to call the business side. So for Ben, when you decided to make the decision to ultimately publish this when it comes out in February, did you initially want to go the independent road for you, or did you decide or think about other roads for publication, hybrid, traditional?
This is an excellent question because honestly, it has shaped so much of who I am as an author, and it's very pertinent to this conversation we're having right now about the Christian undertones in general to the book and how the public perceives that. Quick side note, though, I got to say I love what you're telling me with the angels. The four. I love the speculative side of kind of the angelic pantheon. So I have to say I really like what I'm hearing there.
Thank
But
you.
anyways, as far as the publishing side, I originally wanted to go traditional because there's the higher stigma right around traditional that if you can score a traditional gig, then it's a guarantee of quality. I was under the assumption that if you go traditional, that you wouldn't have to invest as much in marketing, right? That you'd have a professional team that would be able to pick up a lot of the slack, which in a lot of cases there is. And so I started out that route, and I queried for about a year and a half. And the thing that I found kind of disheartening is that I originally designed memoirs to appeal, like I said, to both Christians and non-Christians. It's not preaching, it's not throwing doctrine in your face, but it's teaching a deeper, more relatable message that I purposefully designed for everyone, that everyone would be able to get something out of, regardless of belief. Ironically, though, I discovered that memoirs kind of slipped through the cracks as far as I tried to query to the secular publishers and agents, and they didn't like the fact that they felt it was too Christian. But then ironically, I went to the Christian publishers and agents, and they didn't like how ambitious the book was. The book does cover some darker topics, like death, suicidal ideation. It does cover some darker things. And the action is really gritty. It's not super gory, but it does have gritty action in it. And so it's got a much more somber tone as far as the darkness that needs to be overcome, right? It's topics about this world we live in is dark sometimes. And I'm trying to inspire hope, but I do it in a way that isn't your typical, feel-good Hallmark kind of book. I feel a lot of times Christian literature falls into that, super happy, feel-good kind of category. And so memoirs kind of skirts a lot of lines that fall directly between Christian and secular, which is what I designed it to do. But the problem is that neither side wanted to brave faith. Does that make sense? So the Christians, like I said, they used the term, it wasn't for a homeschool audience. While, like I said, the mainstream publishers just felt that it was too Christian in general. So I looked at possibly hybrid publishing. But I discovered that if you are a competent person at doing indie publishing, because hybrid publishing, there's very little difference other than you have like a company kind of holding your hand. So it's basically like guided self-publishing. But it can be kind of expensive, and they take royalty cuts. So it just didn't make a lot of sense, financially speaking. I consulted an experienced author who explained to me, broke it down and said, if you look at my own following, right? My following on social media, that I get more engagement than a lot of the hybrid publishers do. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense to advertise through a secondary party if I could just invest a quarter of that money in my own advertisement, right? So long story short, with memoirs and probably with the rest of the Gray Spirit series that it's going to become, I'm going to expand it. I'm probably going to go indie with that because I'm after having gone through the self-publishing process, I've actually discovered it's not that hard. I mean, it's work intensive, but skill-wise, it's not as hard as I thought it would be. And frankly, the story is just too powerful to let die because the gatekeepers don't want to give it a chance. Does that make sense? I have
Yes.
such a strong aversion to the gatekeepers and their narrow vision for what should pass as a book. And like I said, everyone that's read it cover to cover has had just the best things to say about it. And I didn't want to let it, just die. So I'm moving forward indie publishing, and I don't regret it at all.
Absolutely. And you actually brought up another good point, which is the gatekeepers, which a lot of authors say now more than ever, gatekeepers in traditional publishing are kind of, and the same point I make here, viewers and listeners, is a statement that I've gotten from a lot of other authors. It's not just my own opinion, but it's from the collective opinions of authors that I've had on the show, that they kind of turn away first-time authors or aspiring authors to go other roads of publication, whether it's hybrid or indie. And I definitely feel, like Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, and all those other companies, like everyone wants to get into those, like Penguin Random House, probably one of the biggest ones, Tor, Forbes. We all aspire to get into those, but it's hard. It is very hard because for them, it is a business. They have to think of, is this book going to make us money? And not to say you couldn't go into traditional publishing, viewers and listeners, you can't. But understand, for them, your book is a product that they have to sell. And if it's not going to sell, it's going to be shelved just like that.
Exactly.
And, yeah. And one of my other friends also mentioned that to look into the smaller publication houses, the small independent ones that have a good following, that do have, years in the business. They may not be as big as the ones that are on the East Coast, but they have a loyal fan base. And a lot of my authors have said that that's also another avenue to explore. Give these small indie houses a chance, because you never know. They may be the ones who, get your book, they love it, and your book is now out there on the market, maybe in their newsletter, maybe anything. So definitely give indie houses, small publishing houses, a chance, in addition to hybrid publishing and independent publishing. Now, going forward, you did mention something about speaking with the seasoned author who talked about, their fan base, their brand in social media compared to, publishing through a second party. And I did want to talk to you about how you started your own platform and author identity on social media, Red Nova Books, and how that came about, and honestly, the name behind it, because I'm always curious behind, what's in a name. So can you tell us about the creation of Red Nova Books?
That is another excellent question. So Red Nova Books, how it started was I kind of debated at the point that I was going to become an indie publisher. I debated, did I want to get published under my own name, or did I want to have a larger publishing platform on which to do it? The name came from inspiration from my sci-fi novel / series. And let me see if I can find, I've got the logo. You can kind of see inside the first cover.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, and so the logo has significance to my sci-fi series as well. But the reason why I opted to go with Red Nova Books over just publishing under my own name was actually so that if in the future I chose to expand and take other authors kind of under my wing, that we could collaborate marketing and reach and share, audience, to where we could kind of grow mutually. So that was like my long-term goal, was to kind of keep it open, that if I wanted to expand it and add more authors to it, I could. Plus that there's kind of a blanket of different series that I plan to put under it. And so rather than kind of typecasting my own author name as a specific kind of series, I wanted it to be kind of all under the same branch. But yeah, long story short is that the name and the logo are inspired by my sci-fi series, with you've got the 4-pointed star inside an omega, and the 4-pointed star inside the Omega is kind of symbolic of the eye that these alien people have in my series, that they have kind of a double slit kind of eye, you know what I'm saying? The pupil. And so it's kind of reminiscent of that. Those that have, beta read my book will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so as people get deeper into my books, it has even more significance. But yeah, that's kind of what I did with it.
Awesome. So now to actually talk about the audience of Memoirs of a Household Demon, because for us authors, we are the target audience first and foremost. We know how the story is going to end. We know what kind of storytelling we're going to showcase, and we also know what genre the book is going to be. But when we publish it or begin like the beta read, ARC read phase, we have to consider, from the discussions from our reviewers, okay, I need to fine tune the book so that way it fits in this genre that I'm trying to get into, or retweak the book so it can probably go into a different genre based upon the response of the reviewers. So for you, Ben, when you were in your beta phase and now in your ARC phase, do you have a good idea of the genre and the audience you are marketing towards? And in your opinion, when should an author take into account their audience?
That's a very excellent question too. The thing is memoirs was very difficult to place as a genre, just because
okay.
the closest approximation that I came up with was paranormal urban fantasy, because it ticks a lot of the boxes that an urban fantasy has.
Right.
But it's so unique in the story and the approach it has and the elements that I honestly couldn't find a lot of books that were like it. Some of the closest approximations that I found was kind of like a modernized twist of the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. But I'm not sure how you would even classify the Screw Tape Letters, for example, or This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti, or Good Omens, right? Where it kind of fits into a speculative, spiritual, urban fantasy kind of vibe. So, like I said, I went with urban fantasy because I felt like that was the closest approximation. And as far as my audience, those that read it, there's lots of kind of pop culture references. It's set in a modern setting, right? So there's a lot of slang and verbiage, and like the way the characters interact are in such a way that ideally I think people between the ages of say like 16 and 40 would like get the most out of it. Kind of like a younger adult audience would probably enjoy it the most. And then obviously I think people of a slightly more Christian bend would probably enjoy it more. Like I said, it's designed for anyone, but if you do have a lot of knowledge of Christian theology and you see how I've interwoven it with just general ghost lore, a lot of people find that really fascinating. So I would probably say, young adult Christians would probably be like the most ideal. But as far as like when you would want to incorporate, the audience you're writing for, that's kind of a tough question to answer, because of the fact that we as writers, and especially a difference between indie and trad, is in trad, it's all about how do I sell? How do I sell? I write to sell. I don't write what I want. I write what I think the people want. And that's one thing about trad I'm kind of glad that I don't have to deal with, is that as an indie writer, I wrote it to what I wanted to read. Right. So as far as like when I was creating the book, I didn't really have a lot in my mind of like, who specifically am I selling this to? It was kind of like, who would share these views, right? Who would share this interest, and kind of just see where the chips fall. In my opinion, I think it really depends on what you want to get out of the book as far as when you should take the audience into account. So if you're just 100% all you care about is sales, and you don't really have, a lot of specific heart and soul to put into the book, then you could do it up front. Plan the book around how you want to sell it. I feel like most of us authors, as artists, we're more passionate about, what we want to write. And so we try to put maybe the marketing aspect more on the back burner. And at that point, maybe you just want to focus on your audience just as you start going to marketing. So once you've already gotten the book as sharpened up as you can, and you're ready to throw it at the market, then you just think, okay, well, how can I package this thing? Or at least, what kind of paint job can I put on this that would appeal to people that would then fall in love with it for what it is? Does that make sense? So
Yes.
So yeah, it's been tricky. It's been tricky, especially, trying to query to the trad scene. You kind of got to do that. You got to think of, how am I going to sell this before it even hits the people? Because first you got to sell it to the agents, right? And so, with a lot of workshopping and filing down the blurb, for example, that's where I kind of fell into that niche of paranormal urban fantasy.
Excellent. Excellent, Ben. And apologies, but for some reason there was actually a glitch in like the beginnings of what you were saying. So half of it was unfortunately cut out. So this will not be in the final cut. So I'm actually going to do a hotspot just in case
You need
that.
me to redo it?
Let me just fix the connection really quick. So that way. Ben, if you could tell us about, again, like the audience and how that came into focus when you were drafting the story, understanding your beta readers and also your ARC readers. And in your opinion, when should an author take into account the audience as well as the genre that they are writing in?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of determining what genre you fall into or what audience you're trying to appeal to is based on what you want to get out of the book, right? So if you're all about the marketing, all about the selling, you just want to sell books, then you would want to tailor the book up front. So you already know that you want to write for that specific audience. But as artists ourselves, right, as artists, I feel like we writers often are more about our own passion, right? We're all about writing what we ourselves would want to read. And so in my case, I didn't take into consideration what kind of genre specifically I would fall into or what audience I would be selling to until I got to the trad querying stage, because I had to sell it to the agents before I even sell it to the people.
Right.
And it was at that stage that the closest approximation of where memoirs kind of falls would be the paranormal urban fantasy. But the book itself is just, it's so unique and difficult to place that there wasn't really any other category I could think to put it in. But I would definitely say that due to the content, the pop culture references, the humor, the interactions between the characters, that I feel like kind of a younger adult audience, maybe between 16 and 40, would probably be ideal of an audience for memoirs. And then, of course, because of the Christian theological elements, I feel like Christian-leaning people would probably enjoy it the most. But of course, it's tailored in such a way that I feel like anyone would be able to enjoy it. But yeah, I would say it wasn't until I got to like the marketing phase that I kind of thought of how would I package the book or how would I advertise it. And so through a lot of effort of trimming down the blurb and kind of polishing up the elements that I want people to focus on, yeah, that definitely came pretty much right as I went into the marketing phase. So like I said, it kind of depends on what you want out of the book and whether you want to see the audience kind of just align with you or if you specifically want to tailor it to the audience.
All right. So just briefly, would you say that your book falls under new adult or adult fiction in terms of, like you mentioned, the age group for your readers? And also, how have you been able to balance out what I like to call the scale, where you're showing your individuality through your writing, but you're also making references and honoring the stories that you grew up with as a kid? Because I find that very interesting for all authors who balance this tightrope dance of showing your individuality, but you also want the story to be familiar to your readers, but you don't want to ever say, oh, I'm the next so-and-so, because we can never be the next so-and-so because there's only one of us in the publishing world.
Exactly. So to break that question into its parts, first and foremost, as far as whether I would say it's new adult or full adult as far as the content, that one's kind of tough because the main human characters in the story would be counted as what, new adults that are about 25-ish.
Right.
The human characters, and then there's a little girl, the daughter of one of the characters that's 4 years old, and so, you know, but then the spirits themselves are ageless, right? They've been around since the dawn of time. So
Right.
It's kind of funny because I feel like new adults would enjoy it even more than like an older adult. So someone in like their late 30s, 40s, I think would still thoroughly enjoy it. But I do think it might kind of slide more towards new adult. But again, like the concepts of, the suicidal ideation, death, loss,
Right.
things like that, it's kind of hard to place. So I just kind of put it into a general adult category just to kind of let people know that, this isn't a kid's book per se. It does cover deeper topics, not necessarily even dark ones, but just kind of more metaphysical ones. And especially people, that are parents, people that have kids, people that have to provide for their own families. There's a lot of like elements that kind of strike a chord with your everyday working class person. And so I'm trying to segue into the second part. What was the second part of your question?
The second part was, when you were writing this story, how were you able to balance out what I call the scale, your individuality of this story, but also making references to past stories, maybe past authors in terms of like storytelling, plot, characters, so forth?
Yeah, so good question. So with that, what I did is I basically just pulled the good things that I liked about the similar authors, right? So as I said, memoirs is kind of like a modernized version of the Screwtape Letters, where it's the concept of looking at humanity from the outside in, right? So a demon is looking at humanity and kind of, it's satirical as to all the dumb things that we humans do. So it's like a more humorous version of the Screwtape Letters, but then it's got the paranormal epic battles of This Present Darkness, and then it has, the more modernized humor of Good Omens. So I kind of took the best of these more well-known authors and books and then put that together to kind of help sculpt and define what memoirs is.
Absolutely. And kind of now leading into one of the heavy hitter questions, or actually the heavy hitter question. Brace yourself for this one, Ben, because it's a lot to process. So I'll give context to this question. So within, I want to say, 3 weeks, the YouTube series Wandering Quill will be now 3 years old, but I've been doing podcasting now for almost 5 years in total. And in those 5 years, I've interviewed almost now 100-something authors from every background, every genre, every stage of one's life, and I've learned so much from them. And in these interviews, I've learned that there are 2 paths for authors: to be an author, to be known as an author. One is dedicated to the storytelling craft. The other is dedicated to the business side, marketing, showcasing their work on every platform. And each path has its own trials. But generally speaking, for first-time authors, the second path, to be known as an author, is the most enticing, but it leads to a lot of unrealistic goals. And the one thing I've learned in this business thus far is that there is no guarantee your first book is going to give you the rewards and satisfaction you are hoping for. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not. There are others, of course, whose first books did give them that status. That is an incredible feat. But generally speaking, you have this roller coaster of highs and lows where you'll have good days and then you have bad days. But the goals that you make for yourself as an author have to be realistic. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to write full time. That's not feasible. That's not plausible at that moment. It takes time to gradually build your fan base, grow your brand, and so forth. And if you try to make your muse your sole source of income, your passion's going to die. A lot of authors have talked about this and have said that it's been the nail in a coffin for a lot of their friends in the industry. So I turn over to you, Ben, to hear your thoughts on this topic and say, is it true or not that, there is no guarantee that your first book is going to give you everything you want in this industry, but it should not be the roadblock that stops you from becoming a great author.
I totally agree. I would say of those two examples you gave, I would fall into the first category where I would rather be an author than be known as an author per se. Although
All right.
the goal is to kind of do both, right? Because to be an author is to be known as an author. And when people read your work and if they hopefully fall in love with it, then you now have been added to their pantheon of favorite authors, right? The thing is marketing can be super grueling, and I fully accept the fact that the first book will rarely make a giant splash. One of the reasons why I wanted to go trad publishing so bad, and let's be painfully honest here, is that the average self-published book, they say, sells less than 300 copies. Okay. And I believe it. I've seen, some authors really, really struggle to get any amount of sales, especially within like the first year of release, right? So they might have, maybe 30, 40 sales up front, and then it just drops off a cliff. And then I've seen other authors that self-publish, and they're gloating a year after the fact that they're breaking 5K or even going higher and doing 10K in their first year with just their own self-marketing. And it's great when you can hear it. But yeah, it's not something that I personally expect. But one of my biggest inspirations, like one of the authors that I really look up to, is Brandon Sanderson, among many others, because he describes the fact that he wrote 13 books before he made it big. 13 books. Okay. And it's funny because as of right now, sitting in this chair, I'm not sure I've got 13 books in me, right? I might. Hopefully I do. We'll see. But it goes to show that even the greats take a lot of time and effort before they gain traction, right?
Right.
And so I look at that and I understand that you can't compare your level 1 to someone else's level 100, right?
Right.
That we all got to start from somewhere. And, as I mentioned earlier about memoirs being a burner book, I'm not treating it as a burner book, but if it becomes one and I end up exploding later on, that's fantastic. But my first priority will always be to tell a story that people can fall in love with, that we can connect on that level. And that right there is that's my whole motivation for writing, is just being able to uplift and edify people with my own imagination, give them that escape, give them a memorable escape, not just a forgettable book that you just put down. I've had readers tell me a year, my beta readers for memoirs, a year after the fact, they tell me that they still think about that book, that it lives rent-free in their head a year after the fact because of the stuff that it introduces and kind of the spiritual aspect that it introduces. And that right there, to me, is the win. I'm not in it for the money, okay? I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I don't need to write to make a living, but it's something I love to do. And if I'm able to make it big, honestly, awesome. But yeah, I'm not in it to get rich. That's not my goal. It's at minimum to at least break even, so I'm not, just dumping money. But like I said, I would definitely say I'm more into the passion of it than the marketing aspect. I do what I have to, but yeah, that's not my primary focus.
Absolutely. And it's actually something that I've also believed as well. Like, I am a tutor by trade. That is my sole source of, that's my current occupation right now, but currently looking for something more full-time, but that's another discussion down the road. And I love to write on the side. I have outlines for future stories that I do plan on getting to. And then I have people telling me that they want to see more stories from my current series that I have. I have one main series, which is called The Gathering, and I have 2 spin-off books. Well, the second spin-off book is in the works. I already have beta reads for that. And I'm currently working on drafts for the next series, the Last Angel of Earth series, starring Michael, which I plan to make into a 6-book series, which is 3 in the main title, 2 prequel novels, and a final book called The Last Shadow. And that all takes time. It all takes time, trial and error, blood, sweat, and tears, and we only get better as time grows on. Now, we're almost near the end of this incredible interview, Ben, so I'm going to combine the last 2 questions into a 2-parter. So here's the first part. So looking back on your journey thus far with the release of Memoirs of a Household Demon coming out next year in February, are there any people you want to give a personal shout out to who have helped you along the road? Either it's, giving encouragement or have given you a better understanding of the industry, friends, family, fellow authors you've met on social media. Who'd you like to give a shout out to?
Thank you. I got to say, there are so many fantastic authors and members of the bookish community that I'm so grateful for. I'm most active on Instagram, so I've got a lot of friends and supporters on there that have really kept me going. Obviously, I'd have to give thanks to my wife and family first for, putting up with all my craziness. They shoulder a lot. But as far as like towards the professional sphere, towards the authors that have really helped me, I wrote out a quick list, but there's so many more, so I don't want anyone to feel left out. But the person who really dragged me out of my shell and introduced me to the bookish community would be KB McNeil. But then just to name a few others would be Carmilla Grace, Brianne Ritchie Cordova, Taylor Brooks, Rhiannon Rollness, Jenny Peck, Cowrie Karras, Sabine McDaniel, Heidi Siebert, Essie Rowley, Roger Sandry, Victoria Clem, Haley Bono, Erica Everin, A.G. Loudon, and A.J. Braun. So all the AJs. Yeah, lots of AJs. So yeah, A.J. Loudon and A.J. Braun. But yeah, they've all been awesome, super stalwart supporters. And they're the kind of people that keep me going.
Awesome. And as a final question, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors wanting to get a head start on their own author journey, or writers who want to transfer over from just writing as a hobby to potentially writing that leads down to full-time, writing as an author full-time?
Yeah, first and foremost, the best advice I think anyone can give when it comes to writing is never give up. Period. Just don't give up. You will feel at times like nobody cares. It's going to feel like you're screaming into the void. You'll go onto social media and you'll make a post and you're super proud of whatever you just did, and you'll get 2 likes, and one of them's your mom. There will be times where you wonder what you're doing or whether anything you're doing is worth it, but you can't win if you don't play. So you got to just keep chugging. The other thing is writing is like any skill. It takes enormous amounts of practice. The reason why it probably took Brandon Sanderson 13 books before he hit it big was because by the end of that 13th book, you can bet that his skills had improved drastically. And I can tell you right now, every single time I write a book, my skills improve. I've basically written, like I said, my sci-fi novel, I've written 4 times. I completely rewrote it 4 times. And then Memoirs is on its 5th iteration. So, yeah, like I've essentially written like 11 books, even though only, 2 and a novella have physically taken form so far. But I've already got more in the works, and, you get better with each iteration. So, even if your first book or your first draft is a raging dumpster fire, that's totally okay, because you're going to get there as long as you keep going.
Absolutely, 100%. And with that, viewers and listeners, we arrive at the end of this amazing author interview with Ben. I want to give a huge thank you to him for coming on the show. Now, Ben, where can people find and engage with you on social media, as well as join your ARC team for Memoirs of a Household Demon? And where is it available for pre-order for people to reserve a copy?
All right, excellent. So I'm most active on Instagram at Red Nova Books. I'm also under that handle on TikTok and Facebook. So Red Nova Books, you can look me up. So Memoirs of a Household Demon is already available for pre-order, both ebook and paperback on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the big electronic distributors. But I'm also going to be doing a pre-order special edition pack with like all kinds of extra goodies and then signed paperback from my website, rednovabooks.com, within the next couple weeks. It's not live yet, but it will be soon. So that's where people will be able to get that. And then I also have the prequel to Memoirs of a Household Demon, Prelude of a Guardian Angel. And this one is already out and live on Amazon, both ebook and paperback. So if people are looking for it, they should be able to find it there. And as far as arcs go, we could include a link, hopefully, that people can click on to get to. I have a form that people can fill out, and then yeah, if they're interested, then they could join the team.
Excellent. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. And one final thing, viewers and listeners, going to move out of frame really quick. If you see my last video, I made another reminder that Michael, Last Angel of Earth, is available at 50% off in ebook form on Barnes & Noble. I will link it down below, the code to use to get 50% off of Michael. It is a great book. It's already has now 7 5-star reviews. So if you're looking for another fantasy book this holiday season, you want to give it for yourself or a family member or a friend, this is the book to go. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. I have just now 2 more interviews for the month of December, as well as the last Historians Lounge episode for December. So after that, I will see you all next year for the Wandering Scribe Year 3. So be on the lookout for that newsletter. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Ben, for coming on the show. And we wish him the very best with his book and his journey as an author. So, Ben, again, thank you so very, very much for coming on the show. And also, viewers and listeners, thank you again for your continued love and support. 150 subscribers, 250 videos, 10,000 reviews, and counting. That's incredible within 2 years. So let's keep the train going. As always, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.